Yo, Kipis Guy here. Hey, so we are back for part two of setting up the MiniDSP and getting our subs ready to go, nicely calibrated. In part one, what we did was make sure that our software is all set up. We have to make some changes in our MiniDSP as well as our AV receiver or processor and in-room EQ wizard. So if you haven't seen part one, it is more than important to go back and watch that part because it gets everything set up. And if you don't have it set up, you will not get any results moving forward. So go back and watch part one. I do have a playlist called MiniDSP, so you guys can go in and follow the parts depending on where you are. But today in part two, we're gonna get right into time alignment, getting our subwoofers time aligned, setting delays, making sure that we can fix peaks and nulls, getting a really smooth line, and we'll even talk about some parametric EQ. So let's go. All right, so now that we have all of our speaker levels matched, we now want to kind of measure our graph and see where we are as a baseline. What is all my subs together doing in my room? So make sure you go back and unmute all of your subs. Once you do that, go to Room EQ Wizard. You want to hit Measure. And in here is where you're going to spend most of your time. You're going to be back and forth through these tabs all day long. So we want to measure our subs and just see what they're doing uncalibrated. So I have this named as all subs no calibration just so I can see a baseline. I have my frequency range. My subs dig down to 12 hertz. I'm going to do 12 hertz up to 150. And then I think everything else looks good. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. This is going to do a frequency sweep from 12 hertz to 150 and then show me a graph of what it's done. So let's go ahead and try it. All right, so my volume is a little bit low. I need to turn my volume up on my receiver there, but this is the line, the graph that my subs have created in this room with no calibration, no EQ. We haven't done anything to it. Not a bad start, which is good. The smoother the line is to start with, the less EQ and everything you're gonna have to apply later. So very happy to see this. This is just what good placement and room acoustic treatment will do. So this is good. This is a good start. A little bit of a null down here towards 105, 106 hertz. A little, a little valley down here. A little bit of a valley down here towards 14, 13 hertz. Not a big problem. We can fix this. We're pretty smooth to begin with. Honestly, a lot of people who do their calibration may end up with a line looking like this. So I'm happy to at least start this way. So this is my subs with no calibration. What do we do now? Well, now it's time to time align our subs, making sure that all our subs are working in tangent together, not against each other. So we want to time align. How do we start by doing that? Well, we want to go back to our DSP, right? And how you time align is you start to add delay to your sub so that all the frequencies reach your ear at the right time and they don't cancel out all the other frequencies trying to reach your ear, right? So we want to time align, and you usually want to start with the sub that's closest to you. You want to add delay to the sub that's closest to you. Now, if you have two subs and they're equidistant, well, you may want to play around with this a little bit more to see what you want to change. But for me, I have a sub that is definitely closest to me, and that is output number 4 here, the rib mimic. It is right behind my seating position. The other two subs are more towards the front. So what I want to do is measure each sub first to see what it does on its own. So I'm going to mute the ceiling sub and the rhythmic sub in the back, and we're just going to measure the sub in the front. So I'm going to go back to Room EQ Wizard. I'm going to go back to Measure. I'm going to name this front sub if you want to, just to make it. I'm actually going to call this rhythmic sub, and I'm going to run it by itself. So there's one sub by itself, the rhythmic sub. I'm now going to do the same thing again for, where's my tab? Let's mute that, and let's do the in-ceiling sub. There's that one in blue. I'm gonna name that in ceiling. And then we're gonna do one more, and we're gonna do just the sub closest to me, which was this one back here. Oh, I forgot to mute that. Let me do this real quick. I'll come back and measure that again, actually. Let's mute this one. Go back. Let's delete this file, because that was with 2 subs, not 1. Let's do this one again. So this one is my in ceiling. And then we'll go back to the DSP, mute the in ceiling, and unmute the one closest to me, the other rhythmic sub. Go back to Room EQ Wizard, hit measure, and we'll do this one. There we go. So all 3 subs are measured individually, and when you play them together, the orange line is what you get, and then you can see how they act individually. So we did this for a reason, because we need to know what the subs are doing by themselves in order to know how to time align. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually get rid, let me go down here and get rid of this measurement, get rid of the in ceiling measurement. And let me name this Rhythmic so I don't get it mixed up. Rhythmic. There we go. So what we want to do now, this is the front sub. We're going to time align these 2 subs together. I'm going to go back to the MiniDSP and I'm going to unmute the front sub with the sub closest to me. And we're going to measure those 2 subs together. I'm going to turn off the sub by itself. So this is my front sub and my rear sub together. The sub that's furthest away from me and the sub that's closest to me. This is their measurement. Not bad. We'll see if we can make this better. We're going to go to the MiniDSP. Now it's time to add delay to the sub closest to me. I'm just going to start off with 1 millisecond. See how that does with the line. So any changes you make 1 change at a time. Come back and measure it and see what you've done. So let's see the difference here. I'm going to name this R and R for rhythmic and rhythmic 1 for millisecond. So rhythmic and rhythmic 1 millisecond. And let's take a look down here. So it looks like we didn't change it too much. It looks like we gained some output here. We kind of smoothed out the 40 hertz line a little bit more. Not bad. And the line stayed relatively the same from there. I like that. So now let's go back to the MiniDSP. Let's go from 1 millisecond. Let's go to 2. Let's see what 2 milliseconds does. Go back into Room EQ Wizard. We're going to hit measure. We're going to name this, let's do R and R2. So rhythmic plus rhythmic 2 milliseconds. Let's hit start. So let's see what we've done here. So it looks like we lost decibels, we lost output between the last measurement that we did and the new measurement here, but our line continued to smooth out again. So that dip we had at 40 hertz is pretty much gone. Now we've actually added some dB here at 40 hertz, which is great. We like that lower bass notes to be accented. The line still stayed relatively the same here, even though we lost a fraction of a decimal of a dB here. I still like the red line better because we continue to stay smoother. I'm going to now try number 3. Let's go back to the DSP. Let's go to delay. Let's go from 2 to 3. Again, we're just adding delay to the sub closest to us. Go back to Room EQ Wizard. We're gonna hit measure. We're gonna name this R and R3 for 3 milliseconds and hit start. So between the last measurement and the green measurement, we gained back another decibel, or a tenth of a decimal here. And then now we have further smoothed out that dip here. This is where we started. Where's my R and R? Right here, I think. The purple line. The purple line is where we started, and the green line is where we are. So we've completely eliminated this dip at 40 hertz. We're kind of playing around with the line here. Overall, this is staying the same. I'm not too worried about that. We kind of added some output, or lost some output down here at about 65 hertz or so. Not a huge deal. It's probably less than a dB, but we've really gained back our 40 hertz. So for me, I really like that. I think it's worth trying one more. Now with the DSP, what's cool about it, you can go down to the 10th. So I can put 3, let's go 3.5 and see what that does to our measurement here. So back to Room EQ Wizard. We're gonna measure. We're gonna call this R and R 3.5 and run it. So let's take a look between the last measurement and now. We lost another little bit of decibels. We actually here still kind of gained some more output at 40 hertz. We're starting to lose it around 70, 80, which is okay for me because my main speakers will take over from there. So that's fine. I'd probably stop here at either 3 or 3.5, but let's compare the 3.5 to where we started at. And that's what we've done to the line. We've completely gained back 40 hertz. We were losing it a little bit. We gained it back. We're starting to gain back our 60. Actually, we were losing a little bit, our 60 or so, which is fine. We don't want to lose too much. So I'm thinking the green line is probably the better line. So that's 3 milliseconds. I'm going to go back into my MiniDSP. I'm going to change this, move it. There we go. I'm going to go back to my MiniDSP and we're going to stay on 3 milliseconds. That is my number there. Love that. Now we want to do the same thing for the in-ceiling speaker. We want to unmute that. We want to measure it. And then we want to add delay to that speaker too. I'm going to do that off camera because you guys can see how long this will take, but you guys get the idea. Start with the furthest speaker, match it to the front, great. Then add this next subwoofer to the equation, add milliseconds to there until you get what we call positive summation. This, what we were getting, is positive summation. When you make changes and your line begins to grow this way, you are getting positive summation. You can see that at the bottom with your decibel readings. If they're going down, you're getting negative summation. It's not always a bad thing, but if you're getting too much of a lower decibel, then you are going in the wrong direction. So keep moving until you stop getting positive summation and then revert back to the setting that gave you the most output and the smoothest line. I'm gonna do that for my in-ceiling sub off camera and then we'll continue from there. All right, so I just spent another 20 minutes time aligning all the subs. I just did the ceiling sub and I actually ended up going pretty high on that millisecond. I went to 12.5 on the ceiling sub. Once I got higher than that, I started to add nulls or extend nulls that are already there. So I stopped here. Even though I was getting more output, I was digging a deeper null in some spots. So let me show you what time aligning does to your subs if you have 2 or more. So again, this was all the subs by themselves, all 3 subs powered with no time alignment, no EQ, no anything. It's just them by themselves. Pretty good line. Can't complain too much about that. Then we did all subs with time alignment on just one sub. So we time aligned the sub closest to us. What we did there was we got rid of the dip at 40 hertz and we kind of sweetened up the dip a little bit around 100, 110 hertz. So the line became a little bit more smoother. Then we time aligned all the subs and we got this graph here. So if we compare where we started to where we are now, take a look. Mostly we're higher in output. We did kind of move this null from, what is this, 42 or so? Yeah, about 42 hertz. We moved that null from 42 to 37, but it didn't get any worse, right? It just changed where the null is. The difference between the two, let's see, this is about 94 dB versus, so it's a null that we don't want. We will attack this here soon, but overall, we went from having 94.3 dB of overall volume. We lost a little bit and went down to 84.7, but that's because we smoothed our line out. And now we have a much more even bass response, which is what time alignment is all about. Making sure that your line is smooth and that your subs are reaching your ears at the right time. They're not fighting against each other. So even though we lost overall output from where we began, we have cleaned up these nulls, especially this one here, down between that 100, 110 hertz range. It was severe. It wasn't good. It's completely gone now. It is no longer there. So now I have a much smoother response. Now, of course, our subs aren't going to be playing that high very often, but there are times when we do have information sent to our subs that high. So overall, we have a pretty decent line. We're not any worse than where we started for sure. So again, here is where we were. Orange is where we were. Blue is where we are now. We are higher in output in those infrasonic frequencies. 10 hertz, 20 hertz, it's higher now. 25, 30 hertz, it's higher now. Yeah, we have a little bit of an issue at 37. It was once an issue at 43. So overall, we've gained output, or we've at least smoothened the line out so that we have a more even response. But we're not done yet. So now we have our benchmark line here. This is now our graph for all three subs time aligned. This is what we're getting frequency wise. Not a bad graph, pretty smooth overall. A lot of people always think that you can switch the phase to your subs and change your bass quality. You can. Having your phase set incorrectly will either add cancellation to your bass or bring it back if you had it set wrong to begin with. On your MiniDSP, you see the invert tab here. This is switching your phase polarity from normal to reverse, right? 0 to 180. My rhythmic sub, output number 4, is in the back of the room. And a lot of people think if you have your subs in the back of the room, that you should switch its phase to inverse or opposite, negative, 180, whatever it's called. It should be opposite of what's up front. Well, we're gonna see if that's true right now. I'm going to invert my phase from 0 to 180 on my sub that's in the back of the room, and I'm gonna run a graph. Nothing changed other than that. I'm gonna run a measurement with that now there, and I'm just gonna type in inverse, and let's start. So this blue line is now reverse polarity versus, the blue line is what we started with versus the orange line being reverse polarity. What do we think about this graph here? Overall, we just gained 7 decibels back, and the line kind of got, a little bit smoother, right? That problem area we had at 37 hertz is now no longer there. It is almost a flat line. But we did kind of add one now at 50, 55 hertz. Now that's an issue. So we reversed everything. We've flipped it all. So again, the orange line is our new line. The blue line was what it was before I reversed it. So in my opinion, I would probably go with that reverse polarity versus the blue line. I think the blue line towards the latter half has a little bit more output, but that's where my main speakers will take over. My crossover point will probably be around 80 hertz, and my main speakers will take over. So I'm not too worried about that, right? But what we got back was that 50 hertz line, or excuse me, what we got back was that 30 to 40 hertz line. That's some good bass right there. 50, we lost a little bit, but we can make that better. I think overall, we gained so much output that I would probably stay with switching that polarity. to inverse. Now, this is not always going to work, so I recommend you running this on your own DSP with your sub and playing with the phase there, because this may not be the case. I've had many times where I've reversed the polarity inside of this sub and it made it worse, even though the rule of thumb is to have it opposite if you have one in the back. I think it worked out perfectly this time, but it's not always the case, so make sure you be careful with that. Now, if you thought you were done at this point, well, you're not. We got more to do. You guys take a look here on your graph. At the top right hand, you'll see this icon that says EQ. We want to hit this button. What this is going to do is help us try to smooth this line. We're going to add EQ to our subwoofers. Remember, we're treating all of our subwoofers as one big sub. So all the changes that we make to one will affect all of them, because we want them to be one big sub instead of 3 individual ones, or however many you have. Again, this line right here is all my subs together, so we want all subs to be playing the same frequencies at the same volume. That was the point of time aligning them all, so that they all do the same thing. Now, we're gonna hit EQ, and what you're gonna see here is your graph that you've made on the previous screen, and now we have a target curve. There's some settings that we wanna do. Now, under here, under generic, we wanna hit what you're using as your DSP. I'm using the MiniDSP here. And under target settings, we want to make sure that we get this set correct. Make sure that it's set the subwoofer. And we don't really want it to add any bass management. We want our receiver or preprocessor to actually be doing this part when you run calibration. So we want to set this to just any kind of ridiculously high number way above your crossover. I'm going to set my crossover probably 80-90 hertz, but to make sure that the MiniDSP and Room EQ Wizard is not bass managing anything, I'm setting it to a really high number. Same thing with the cutoff. I'm going to set this to 0. I don't want the Room EQ Wizard to be bass managing anything. My receiver is going to do that for me. Now, as far as these numbers down here, I actually had some help with this. I wasn't too sure what it was telling me. I see what it's doing to the graph, but I wasn't sure what it's telling me. So I'm going to show you guys what was suggested to me. And I'll show you guys in part 3. So make sure you check my playlist down below called MiniDSP, where all my parts will be in order so you guys can follow with me, get everything set up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for part 3. Leave me any questions or comments down below, and we'll see you in the next video. K-Bass Guy out. Peace.